So in this particular lecture, let's go ahead and let's start with styling of this particular edit form which we have. So currently, if you go to /users/edit, this is the kind of form you're able to get. And here, as you can see, the form is actually styled in a pretty weird fashion so that you are not even able to recognize which is a text field and which is an input field. So the question is, how would you style this? So we obviously know how to style the home page, which is this page right here, and it was pretty straightforward because you didn't have any kind of form there. But now when you go to a form which looks something like this, and if you take a look at the code here for edit.html, this is what the code for this form looks like. Now the major problem with this particular form is that if you actually take a look at the code right up over here, in order to render the form, we have actually used userform.asp and profileform.asp. Now the problem with this is that this actually renders the entire user form and this one actually renders the entire profile form. But what if you actually want to access the individual fields which are actually present inside these forms? So the best part about this is that you could actually do that, and now in order to learn how to access the individual fields so that we could style them is that you could simply go ahead, go to your web browser, and now if I right click over here and inspect this code, you'll be able to see the HTML code for this one. And in order to specifically get a particular form field like this one, I will specifically click here, click on inspect, and here as you can see it's actually going to go ahead and give me this particular thing right here, which is the unique ID of that particular input field. So let me just show you what this particular field has. So this field has an ID which is ID underscore first name, but what we exactly want here is the name of this field, which is automatically generated by Django. So the name here for this particular input field is first underscore name. And by making use of this particular form field name, we could actually render this individual element right here. So let's see how this can be done. So what I would do here is that currently let's go ahead, go back to the code. And for now, let's actually take the form ASP and profile form ASP from here. Let's take it out of the actual form and let's paste it up over here. Now, if you go back and hit refresh, as you can see, the form is still rendered, but we will be actually designing our very own form over here right from scratch. So from the user form which we have, the first field which we want to recreate is the first name field. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll go right back here, and now instead of rendering the entire form, I would actually go ahead and render the individual element. So here, first of all, let's create a label, and this label could be manually typed up. So for example, we could say first name here. So I'll go back to VS Code and simply say first name. Let's not add any kind of styling here for now. And now let's say if I actually want to access the form field here. For accessing that particular form field, I simply have to go ahead, make use of the template syntax, and instead of saying user underscore form dot as p, instead what I would do now is I would actually go ahead and make use of the form field name which we have gotten here. So if you actually inspect this particular element, the form field name over here is first name. So let's simply get access to that name. So here I'll go back to code and say first underscore name. And if I do that, let's see what happens. So if I go back here, as you can see, now we have this particular form field created along with the label. So the label here is hard-coded, which we have created right up over here. And the form field we have actually gotten up from the Django template. And this is the actual form field being reproduced here. So in a similar fashion, we could also reproduce the last name, the email field, and the other fields which we have as well. And we could now style them individually. So let's go ahead and let's actually start styling this thing up. So in order to style it up, I'll go back to VS Code. And here let's start off with the label. So first of all, what we will do is that we'll create a div for each particular item which we have. And now let's take the label as well as the input and put it up in this particular div. And now let's add some margin to this particular div. So let's add a class of MB to here. Once that thing is done, now let's start styling up the label by adding a class to it. So first of all, I want to actually make it a block. And then I want to make the text of this thing to be gray with a shade of 700. I want this text to be smaller sized, and I want the text to be bold. and I want the margin on the bottom side to be 2. So if I do that, if I go back here, if I hit refresh, as you can see, this is what the form field looks like, which currently says first name. Now let's style up the label, which is down right here. So in order to style up that particular label, I'll again go back to VS Code, and here, as we cannot directly style this thing up, what we will do is we'll actually create a div for that as well. So here I will say div, and then let's simply put this thing up in that div which we have above. So let me paste it up over here, and now let's start adding some classes to this div to style up our input field. So here I would say class is going to be nothing but, let's add some shadow. I would say appearance as none. I would add a border to this thing because currently it does not have any border. Let's make this input field rounded. Let's add some padding on the y-axis to be 2, padding on the x-axis to be 3. And now let's also add some margin at the right, which is, let's say 10. And now let's say I want the text inside this thing to have a gray color. And let's also add some shade here as 700. Now if I go back here, hit refresh, as you can see, this is what the input field looks like, and this is what exactly we want here. But you'll also be able to see that if I actually click it up over here, this is what you'll be able to get. And that's something which we do not want, and that's something which we are going to fix later. But as you can see, the first field of our form is pretty much rendered here. And what we will do is that we'll copy the same code which we have up over here for other fields as well. So for now, let's actually format this thing in a little bit better way. Okay, so now here we also have an input type submit. So let's take it out of the div which we have here. And this thing is an entire div which contains the label for a particular field as well as the actual text field. So let's paste that thing in. This is for the last name, this is for the email, and let's also paste it for the profile photo as well. So I'll paste this thing. Okay, so once we have this, now let's work on adding the other fields. So this first name will be replaced by our last name, and we actually get the last name by inspecting this particular element. So if you inspect this, as you can see, its name is last name. So I would add in last underscore name here. The next field which we are looking for is nothing but the email field. Now to get the actual name of that particular field, I will again repeat the same process, inspect this. Now its name is actually directly email, so I could use that. So here I would simply replace it with email. So here this one is going to be actually for the photo. So in here, in order to access the field for photo, what I would simply do is I would simply go ahead, click on this, inspect it. And here, as you can see, for this particular field, we have the ID as ID underscore photo. That means the name of this field is photo. So here I would simply say photo. And remember that this particular is not from user form, but instead it's actually from the profile form. So let's change it to profile underscore form dot photo. And there we go. We have this one field extra. So let's get rid of that. And if I go back here, I should be able to get all the fields here. So as you can see, we almost got all the fields, but now the labels are kind of named weird. So let's fix that as well. So after first name, we have last name. Let's also add some spacing in between them. First name, last name, then we have the email, and then finally have the photo. So email and then photo. Okay, so now the form is pretty much ready. So let's get rid of this form which we had previously. So in order to get rid of this form, I'll simply delete these two lines of code. And now we have this submit input right up over here. Let's actually change that thing to a button and style it up. So here I would say button. The type is going to be submit. And now in order to style this thing up, I would add a class. Let's make this thing a green colored button. So BG green with a shade of 500. Let's make the text to white. Let's add some margin on the y-axis to be 5. Let's add some padding on the x-axis to be 5 as well. Let's add some padding on the y-axis to be 2. So once this thing is done, if I hit refresh, okay, so it does not have any name. So let's add a name as submit. If I go back, as you can see, this is what the form looks like. And it kind of looks pretty neat. It's not styled that well, but now you know how to style a form by accessing its individual elements. So now let's also style up the heading at the top as well. So let's add some classes to this one. So here I would say class is going to be text. Let's make the text to be larger because this is a heading. Let's add some margin as well of 10 from all the sides. Let's make the font as bold. And let's say this thing says edit user profile. Let's also add a nice looking emoji here of a person, which is a user. Okay, so now if I go back, let's see how the form is going to look like. So as you can see, this is what the form currently looks like. And as you can see, this thing right here is not aligned well. It's kind of sticking right to the left hand side of our screen. So let's fix that as well. So one thing that could be done is that we could actually take this entire form and put it up in a container and add some margin or padding to that particular form on the y-axis. So we could do that by simply going into our code and taking up the entire form and putting it up in a div. So here I'll create a div. I'll actually give it a class of container, and I would add a padding of 5 on the y-axis. Once we have this particular div, let's take up our entire form, which we have, and let's put it up inside this div. So let's see how that worked out. So if I hit refresh, as you can see, this is what the form looks like. You could also add some margin on the x-axis as well. So mx, let's say that's going to be something around 10. So as you can see, now the form looks pretty neat and clean, and this is what exactly we want. So now the edit form is ready, and you could even test out this particular form to make sure that it works really well without any kind of issues. So once this particular page is styled, in the next lecture, let's go ahead and let's style up the password reset form. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.